Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new video. My name is Sam, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today we're going to take a look at a bit of a beginner's guide for anyone who's looking to beat their mates for the first time in FPL. Now, it might not be your first season in FPL, but maybe you're a little bit frustrated with one of your work colleagues or best friends always beating you at the game and you need to get the edge. Look no further. Today's video is going to run through 10 really quick top tips to help you beat your mate at FPL this year. If you enjoyed today's video, please do remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. But in the meantime, let's have a look at those top 10 tips. So the first one I wanted to take a look at today is an absolute classic, and I definitely did it when I first started playing FPL, and that is you see the chips in your home screen and it's really tempting to start playing them straight away. Most seasons I see at least a half of my work league do this, where they play their triple captain, they play their bench boost, they play their free hit in the first 3 or 4 game weeks to get off to a great start. And whilst that's really fun at the time, and I'm sure that you will get a boost from using those chips early on, a lot of the time those chips will be better served waiting and holding off using them till later on in the season. Now in FPL you often get double game weeks and blank game weeks, and those usually tend to come in the second half of the season after Christmas, and a lot of these chips are really useful when a team has a double game week. You might even want to use them in combination with a tactical wildcard in the second half of the season to really maximize the amount of points you get from any given game week. Try to avoid burning through all of those chips straight away and hold off using them until the opportune moment. So the second one is another pretty simple one, and it's picking players that are really good real life players. So the two on screen here, Declan Rice and N'Golo Kante, obviously fantastic elite players in real life, but not such good FPL picks. FPL is a pretty simple game. You really only get points for a number of different components of the sport. So goals, assists, clean sheets are all big in FPL, but for a defensive midfielder like Declan Rice or N'Golo Kante, they don't get those clean sheet points that defenders would. If they get a goal or assist, obviously they get decent points, but because they're defensive midfielders, they don't often get those sort of returns, and putting those funds into players that are more likely to be getting attacking returns will bank you more points over the season, and you'll be more likely to win your FPL leagues. Tip number 3 is another one that I was personally really guilty of for the first couple of seasons when I was playing FPL, and that was going hit crazy, taking -4s pretty much every single week to bring in the best possible players for that given game week. Now, playing FPL for a number of seasons like I have now, it becomes more and more clear that hits don't pay off as often as you think they might do when you first start playing the game. In fact, hits tend to be much more useful when you're faced with a double game week. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, those tend to happen in the back end of the season. Taking a -4 for a upside pick that week is basically banking on them getting one additional attacking return than the player you're taking out. And even though that might often seem obvious, it often doesn't work out quite that way, and more often than not you end up being in a deficit of points rather than accumulating additional points from taking those hits. In addition to this, a sort of second point to this mistake to avoid is trying to optimize your team for every single game week. You might have a game week where 11 out of 11 of your players seem to be the perfect team, and you want to change absolutely nothing about your FPL side, but that only comes maybe once or twice a season. Most weeks you might have 7 or 8 players that you're really happy with for that fixture, for that game week, but over the long term, the 11 that you're picking, or the 15 you're picking including subs, are balanced out so that they really are favourable for the fixtures ahead of you rather than just the game week in front of you at that moment. So try to avoid taking as many hits if you're quite a hit happy manager this season, and just see how it pays off. And let me know in the comments below how many hits you tend to take in a regular FPL season if you've played the game before. Okay, so this is a really quick one, and it's don't copy another FPL manager. Now, first and foremost, it kind of ruins the enjoyment of the game. Half the fun of it is picking players that you genuinely believe are going to get you points. And it's all very well and good seeking out advice from other managers, watching content, and absorbing more information to help you come to a decent conclusion on who you think might be a good pick for that week or for the weeks ahead. But copying another FPL manager, I think personally ruins the enjoyment of the game, but also it means that you're never going to really get ahead of the manager you're copying. So it is a bit counterintuitive, and it also means you're relying on that manager doing well. And there's never a guarantee that any manager that you would be copying is going to do well. Some of the best FPL managers that you'll ever find in the community will have bad seasons from time to time. So this is a rule that I would really highly recommend sticking to. FPL is a lot more interesting when you actually make your own decisions rather than relying on someone else to make sure that you have a good game week. Now, something that happens to a lot of FPL managers when they first start playing is forgetting about the deadlines. Now, first off, deadlines are always an hour and a half before kickoff of the first game of that game week. And that seems really simple to remember. But as the season wears on, you start to be maybe a little bit more forgetful of your team, you stop taking such an interest in the game, and you might miss a deadline or two. Now, whilst missing one deadline isn't going to ruin your season, it kind of becomes a bit of a snowball effect where your team gets a little bit behind the current template or the current most popular picks. All of a sudden, you're 1 or 2 transfers behind where you need your team to be. And this is a really common thing that happens to most FPL managers when they start playing the game, and it leads to them dropping out of the game altogether around about Christmas or maybe slightly after, when the fixtures really start piling up and there are midweek games as well. Now, one easy fix to this is turning the notifications on the FPL app if you use that, and it will usually remind you of a game week deadline when it's about to come. Or you could even set an alarm on your phone once a week for when the deadline is going to be that week. Just staying with an updated team throughout the season leaves you with a much better chance of beating your mates come the end of the season. When you first start playing FPL, it's really tempting to go after the big name players that you know and love, and you know get loads and loads of attacking returns. So just some of the ones on screen here would be obvious popular picks to start the season. Sadly, because of the way the game is structured, the price of these players makes it quite difficult to fit in any more than 2 of them, or maybe 3 at a push, and make a balanced squad that is going to get you a good amount of points throughout your entire 11. Haaland, Salah, Bruno, KDB, even Harry Kane if he stays this season are all going to be pretty popular assets and will get a lot of points over the course of the season. But trying to jam in too many of them into your side means that you're making real sacrifices elsewhere, and in combination, the players that you're picking alongside these premium assets won't be getting you any points. It's all well and good picking maybe 2, possibly even 3 premium assets if you can find a way of squeezing them into your side without making too many sacrifices. But my advice would be to not try and jam too many into your side. It can leave you with quite an unbalanced team, and it means that the players around the edges of your team won't be getting you many points. This is another quick tip that relates to my previous tip, and it's all about picking too many players for one game week only. Now, it's all well and good having a player with one fixture in mind, but having too many of them in your side means that once that game week's out of the way, it's quite hard to shuffle the pack and transfer these players out with bringing in other players in mind. Now, obviously, related to my previous point about not taking too many hits, if you pick too many players with only one fixture or 1 week in mind, it might leave you with a team that's not looking too sharp the following week, and you might then have to take quite a few hits to rejig your team and make it look optimal for the following week. So even if there is a particular fixture that you want to target or a player that you really want to jump on for one game week, just have a look at how that would affect your team and your planned transfers for the weeks ahead to make sure that you're not going to leave yourself in a bit of a corner with quite a lot that you want to do with your team in the weeks to come. So this one is about watching the games and taking in that information, and it's about ignoring positional or tactical changes for a team. Now, Liverpool are a really good example of this at the moment, where they've started moving Trent into that midfield area where he seems to be getting a lot more potential for attacking returns. Now, this won't necessarily impact him too much as a player because we know that Trent is already a fantastic FPL asset, but tactical tweaks like this happen on a fairly regular basis, especially when you move between seasons in FPL. So we're in pre-season at the moment. It's more than likely that a few teams will restructure their 11 and maybe look at implementing a new style or a new tactic, especially if they've got a new manager or new coaching staff coming on board. Really taking notice of how those teams are shaping up tactically at the start of the season will help you find players that previously might not have been fantastic picks, but maybe now they're in a more attacking position, they're getting more chances that lead to goals, or maybe they're now on set pieces where they didn't used to be. It also works in reverse as well, where players who previously might have been really attacking assets and potentially really good for FPL might be not playing in such an attacking manner, or maybe the team just doesn't look as strong in general, and you might want to consider looking at the data alongside the new positions and the new tactics that the manager is implementing and how that might affect them in FPL moving forwards. So on to tip number 9, and this is related to the previous tip, and this one is jumping on a bandwagon after just one good performance. Now, obviously, there are always going to be incidents where you might jump on a player because they've been performing well, or you think that a run of form is just on the horizon and it might well pay off. You might end up looking like an absolute genius. And to be honest, I wouldn't want to discourage you from doing that, because that is one of the best feelings you get when playing this game, calling a player that is about to come into form just before he does so. However, in my experience, more often than not, taking a punt on a player after just one good game week or one good performance usually ends in tears. Now, this is especially relevant to players that don't have previous good history in the game, so we don't normally expect good attacking numbers from them or good attacking output from them. Maybe they've scored for the first time in 5 or 6 game weeks. We don't normally expect them to be a goal scorer, but you're eyeing them up because you think that a run of goals might be coming. Well, more often than not, the data supports the idea that they probably won't continue to score goals week in, week out, and it's more likely that they'll revert back to the mean. So try to avoid jumping on those bandwagons after one good game week or one good fixture, unless you really have a hunch about that player and you're willing to take that risk. So this final tip is all about club biases, and luckily or unluckily, as a Southampton fan, I don't need to worry about club biases anymore because my club are no longer in the league. But for those of you who support a Premier League side, it can be quite common, especially when you start playing FPL, to pick players specifically from your side regardless of quality, or avoid players from a side that happens to be your rivals. So a great example is if you are a Arsenal or a Tottenham fan, you might heavily favour players from your side. Meanwhile, you might avoid picking good players objectively from your rival team, even though they'd be good for your side and get you decent FPL points. Now, you might want to play FPL in that sort of way and actively avoid picking players based on those club biases, and that is absolutely fine. But if you want to win your mini leagues, or at least give yourself the best possible chance of winning your mini leagues, beating your mates, beating your work colleagues, then having an open mindset and being able to pick from every single player in the game is always going to be helpful. Trying to put aside your club biases and look at players objectively based on performance and how they are as an FPL asset is always going to be the best route to ensuring that you have the best possible chance of beating your work colleagues. A final side tip here as well is also relying on historic performances alone. Now, this also comes into biases, but not necessarily about clubs you support or have a rivalry against, but more the preconceptions we have about teams based on how they used to be performing as a team. So historically, for example, Brighton may not have been the best team in the Premier League, and they may not have been full of assets that we want to own. However, last season, it became quickly apparent that they were going going to be a cutthroat attacking outfit, and they were going to provide plenty of value for our sides that season. So despite their prices, despite their historic performances, it became really obvious that there was going to be a load of value there. And they're not the only example either. It also happens much higher up in the league, where you've got teams that previously might have performed to a very high level that then drop off, like Chelsea or Tottenham last season. Or you have the inverse, where Arsenal assets, for example, seem to be underpriced based on the fact that they started performing really well last season, and it became really obvious very quickly that they were going to be excellent picks at their price points last year. So my final piece of advice today would be to keep an open mind about teams and acknowledge the fact that teams get better and teams get worse over the course of several seasons, and even over the course of one FPL season. So do keep an open mind and always be willing to learn more about a side and the way they play and the way their players might be transforming in their systems. So that's all the tips we have for today, and hopefully those top 10 tips will help you beat your mate or your work colleague in FPL this season. I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which of these tips resonated the most with you, or did you have any other tips that you'd like to impart on the FPL beginners out there to help them beat their mates in their mini leagues. In the meantime though, I hope you're all enjoying pre-season and are as excited as me to get going with the 23-24 season. Please do subscribe to me for more FPL content, and I hope to see you again soon in the coming days.